Hey Sharks, I'm Trey Brown.
And I'm Don Brown.
We're two brothers from Los Angeles seeking a $200,000 investment for 5% of our company. You're bumping your favorite track, cruising down the back streets, just catching a vibe.
But then that smell hits you.
Oof, a nearby landfill, spilled coffee, even forgotten french fries can turn your car from an oasis into a horrible, stinky nightmare.
For years.
Even your favorite basketball teams. This one smells like winning.
Sorry, Mark.
Wherever you are right now, I need you to give some super claps for Super Trey and Super Trey. I'm pointing in the wrong direction. For Super Trey and Super Don. Welcome. How are you guys doing tonight?
Appreciate it, Joe.
Oh, I appreciate you guys.
Well.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys reaching out in the comments and deciding to come on. It's always fun to get to share super entrepreneur stories, especially from the Shark Tank, and it's great that you guys are able to be here. So let's jump right in. What was your relationship with Shark Tank? Before getting to know that you were going to be on Shark Tank.
Yeah, so I'll start off. But basically, I mean, we're huge fans of Shark Tank, right? Like we always were since like the first season. We've always been entrepreneurial minded, right? Like we've always been involved in sort of trying to grow a business or be part of a business. We come from an entrepreneurial family and background, right? So like it just made sense. And on top of it, I mean, it's just a hell of a show, right? Like, I mean, obviously, but yeah, we applied. I think it was about 3 times before, right? So we actually, the first time we applied when we was in our first year of business and we didn't have, really any numbers. And we got to the second or third stage, I think it was, after filling out all the paperwork. But then the producers just decided, okay, I guess we're not going to go with these guys this year. So I applied every year after that. And then on this time, I was like, listen, we're growing as a business. We're growing as a company. This is going to be my last time applying for Shark Tank. And I applied, and then we got a call back. And then all this stuff started to happen. We got on the show, obviously. But what was crazy is the same producer that we spoke with the first time, he was in charge of Ride Fresh, or helping to produce Ride Fresh, for actually being prepared to be on television. And he hadn't worked on Shark Tank for, I think it was like 3 years or something like that. And then he ended up seeing us again, and he said, "Oh, I got to get these guys on the show." So it was really cool because we connected over that, because I remember talking to him, 3-4 years ago. And then he actually saw the progression of our company and saw how fast we grew. And he was like, "Oh yeah, these guys, we got to get them on the show." So.
No, I think that's really cool when you get to see people through their journey as well, right? Especially when you talk about years later, and especially if you were in their mind, right? Like if you're memorable for them to want to bring you back and get to have you on, and I'm sure it's exciting for them to get to see that growth as well. So okay, so you applied 3 times prior to getting to be on Shark Tank, which is pretty awesome. I mean, not everybody goes through that process. Did you make it as far in the process, the first 2 times?
So the first time we made it to it was a production call, right, where they basically were like, "Listen, either you make it or not, right, or you're on the path." So we thought like there was just one call the first time where it was like, okay, once that call is done, you're on Shark Tank, right? That we learned this time that wasn't the case. There was a lot of multiple gauntlets you had to go through and pass to actually get to the final the production. And then even when you get on this set and you pitch, all of these pitches don't make it to TV, right? So in our mind, it was okay. So we knew we were interesting enough from the first time. The other 2 times, it just didn't work out for whatever reason. And this time, this is the final time. This is our final shot. Regardless what happens, we need to be interesting as hell, right? Like to make sure that we get on TV, because a promotion from Shark Tank can do wonders for your company. So that's kind of how it shaped up, right? Which was, we got to the, I think that it was like 1% of companies in the ones that actually apply get to the second stage, and then we got to that stage. We didn't get through to the final stage, but this last time we got through, and then we're thinking, oh, we're on TV, right? Like, this is great. Definitely not. It's months and months of preparation, work, pitching, getting your sets right, signing documents, them telling you how it's going to go, right? Presenting in front of the executive producers, having them give you feedback, and then randomly one day getting a call like, listen, you need to be here Saturday at 6 a.m. In the morning. And, that's pretty much how it went down. That's how it happened.
No, I mean that is the story that we've heard a lot here on the show. You don't know until you know, right? Like even with the Shark Tank Live episode where I've had all three of those sets of entrepreneurs on, where they were like, we didn't even know then. Like it's a live show and we might not even be the ones that get to go out there. So it's you just don't know. Now Don, on your end, so you were a big fan of Shark Tank as well?
Yeah, as long as I can remember, man, I used to actually envision myself pitching to the Sharks. My friends, we used to literally sit around and watch some of the reruns and some of like the bigger, funnier kind of moments that we saw. And so going into it, I kind of knew from watching it and being a fan the different like personality traits of each shark and their tendencies as well. And so, it wasn't like we didn't know much about the show. I mean, I've been watching that show, I want to say at least the last 6-7 years, maybe longer than that. I was a business major. Like Trey mentioned, we were always into entrepreneurship. And so to see people get that opportunity, A, to pitch to the Sharks, but B, to get their businesses exposed in the way that you can when you are, you appear on that show, was always just kind of cool to me, like to see. And then also the variety of types of entrepreneurs and businesses that have appeared on the show, and seeing, just like it was actually a huge source of learning for me in terms of how to whittle down a pitch. Because I had a background in advertising as well, but kind of like thinking of, yeah, we know it's cut down from a longer conversation, but if you have to, communicate a business concept or anything really to anybody that you want buy-in from, being able to do it at a fast pace and under pressure. So, I've been a huge fan of the show for a long time.
Yeah, I mean it's the longness of the conversation and being cut down. I think it's for people who aren't like big fans of the show don't realize that like this stuff doesn't happen, in the 8 minutes that it happened on the Shark Tank Live usually. So I mean, to me, I love that you guys were passionate enough about going on Shark Tank to go through the process 3 times, that and I think that just goes to show like how much how special that is, that there's that you're willing to put yourself through the gauntlet more than once, and keep doing it, as our friend here of the show, Kim Meckwood, who applied 7 times to be on the show and got through on her 7th time with the click and carry. Like it is just to apply is an incredible feat, and go through at least some portion of the process is absolutely incredible. But so once you guys started to figure out that you were going to, it was looking more and more like you would get through, what talk to me about balancing the business. If I don't know if you guys had other jobs at the time or still have jobs, and family, as Trey, I don't know if you're willing to share, but it gets complicated.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, I had my first son about a year ago, right? And so that has been thank you. That has been a journey in itself, right? But for me, personally, that focused me even more, right? Because it was like, okay, like this is something that I know we've been doing for a long time, but this is something that I know could change the change the experience that my son will have growing up, right? Like change some of the issues or challenges that he may or may not have to face because I put him in a great situation generationally to succeed. So for me, it was just sort of like, let's hit the ground running. I was pretty much full time into Fresh for a minute. I have a background in sales, right? So the beautiful thing about sales is you can do that anywhere. But for me, it was like, okay, well, if I'm going to be great at sales, I might as well do it for myself, right? Like, and really just take this year, 2 years really to really solidify these relationships, right? And these relationships being with Viacom or now Paramount Media, the NBA, AutoZone, Target, right? Like these are conversations that I didn't know anybody at these places, right? Like I didn't have some magic like wand that I could wave and be like, hey, you guys want to do it right fresh? No, it was hard work, tenacity, and just pulling rabbits out of the hat to make things happen. So I'll never forget, like with AutoZone, it was I still to this day I call it my sales masterpiece because I'm like something like this, it's just so crazy. Like I just literally I'm a LinkedIn warrior, right? So I find these individuals that I think align with what we're trying to sell, right? To a buyer or an organization or whatever. And I didn't know anybody from AutoZone. Middle of Memphis. I'm not from Memphis, right? Like, and I saw this lady on LinkedIn, and I reached out, and I did it in the most like ridiculous way. She didn't have a business number. She only had her cell phone, right, listed. Like it was listed on online. So I said, listen, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So I called her, right? And I said, hey, listen, she picked up, she says, hello, who's this? And I was like, ma'am, my name is Trey Brown. I'm a young Black entrepreneur. I just need 5 minutes of your time. I know you're busy, but we're really onto something. We're the first Black air freshener company ever created in the United States. Would you please talk to me? And she said, yeah, right. And then after that conversation, she opened the door to everything else and to everyone else and the buyers at AutoZone. So we ended up going there. And so I think it's just like, yeah, it's there. Everybody had different jobs and they have their own personal jobs and they're doing this and that. But I think that it took like that year and a half for us on the retail side specifically, right? And then to really move to the next stage. And like, that's what I had been doing behind the scenes with Shark Tank and everything else. So while Shark Tank is happening, right, like all of this is happening in the background without, like Shark Tank, right? It was just literally us, the three founders making it happen before that. So I think that's really important for your viewers and everyone else to know, right? Which is like, that's how we came into Shark Tank doing all of this as a company. We didn't come into Shark Tank like, oh, we don't really, we need a deal. It was more like, we want a deal, right? And that type of conversation is just different. It's always different in business in general. It's always going to be different. So that's kind of how I worked for the first 2 years, which was getting the funding, making the connections to grow us, to scale us, and then Shark Tank hit, and it was like, great, what I mean? Like another W for us, right? Like, how do we utilize this? And then once Don and I were the ones that really went to work on it, and I'll let Don speak more on it, but we were a solid team in terms of how are we going to maximize this. And with Don's background in marketing, he was able to take it to the next level. And I think he dropped off. I'm not sure.
He did. He did drop off again, unfortunately. But we'll get back with Don on that. So I think 3 key takeaways there. That you did the research, right? You found her number. You were direct in what you were looking for when you did, work up the courage to call the number. And for any, especially young male, knows what it's like to call a female, let alone
Oh man.
somebody that could completely change your life. And and being real about what your intentions were, right? And direct, like, again, that directness, the realness, combined with the research that you put in. I think all three of those key things really make a difference between having. I mean, I've had that time too, where I've called people who are like, normally I hang up on people like you. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. And we end up having a conversation. They end up sponsoring my event, and they never sponsored any other events
Yeah.
prior to mine. But because I made the phone call before, because I made a connection, because I brought something different to the table than what they had already heard in the past for like the 15 years this person had been in the industry, it makes all the difference. And then the other thing, and we'll bring you in, Don, now that you're back.
Sorry, man. I
Is
don't know what's going on with my connection.
It's all good. It's all good. We'll work with it. Is the want versus need a deal? How, explain to me that thought process, and how that thought process would be different had you have been on the show the first time you applied versus the third time you applied.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, it's just about the growth and matriculation of the business and the leverage that you have in a business conversation. So what we were talking about earlier, Joe, with the amount of the conversation that ends up on the cutting room floor, that's kind of like they deem not for TV or whatever reasons. A lot of that is like an actual kind of like not made for TV business exchange, right? Where they're talking about the nitty gritty about the subscription and churn rates and cost of acquiring customers and all of that stuff. And I think in that conversation, because of the way that we've been able to grow the business, it's an entirely different conversation, which gives us a little bit more leverage in terms of a deal or not, right? Like for us, it's had we had that conversation and gotten on at that point in time, I mean, I'd say like nothing really that we discussed in terms of the business we'd be able to say about that company 3 years ago. So I'd say in summary, it's just about the difference between having an early stage business or an idea and then having a fully functional business with traction and accomplishments and leverage, right? From a business standpoint, when you just have an idea and maybe have a prototype and a couple of sales, which you see all the time on the tank, it's not rare for companies at that stage to get deals, but they're deals that obviously at our stage that wouldn't really make us comfortable, right? And so me as the marketing guy, I'm also always thinking of, and I know you'll probably get to this, the joke and all that, is obviously like the biggest factor there is the appearance on the show, what it's going to do for our business from a marketing standpoint. And although we were extremely excited to be on the show and had worked really hard each time to try to get on, we always knew as a team that that's the real prize there. And if you look at the deals that are made on the show, they factor in that TV appearance as well, right? It's not like these are deals or conversations that would occur traditionally, or even valuations that would occur traditionally without the element of the show. So it's kind of known on all sides that, hey, they have all the leverage in terms of before you air. But we know that securing that air date was the North Star for us.
Yeah, I mean, the marketing aspect of it and the replayability of it is so important, right? Certain episodes for sure have been replayed because they get picked up by MSNBC more often than other episodes that just air once in a while on an ABC or replayed on like Hulu or something to that effect. So yeah, and we're gonna get to the joke and all that controversy and all that in a little bit here when we get into the tank itself. But so how did you come up with your 200,000 for 5% valuation?
So when we originally, and that's all part of the whole conversation, right? A lot of things that people just don't see. Um, we had a valuation. We know what the real valuation of our company is, right? But for the producers and for the Sharks, there's a sweet spot, right? That works for them and works for TV, right? Because if I come in there saying my company's valued at 8 million, you know, there are larger sums that you're going to have to invest in order for it to make sense, right? And a lot of those times, we, like Don said, the smaller companies, it makes sense, right? Because those numbers can tend to be out of the range of a normal person who watches the show, right? Like these are all multi-million-dollar deals. That's not sexy, right? Because you're not really, helping the guy on the street who, right, like who has the idea and it's really good in a company and they can grow and scale it, but they need this little nest egg to start, right? So we were sitting there in the production, not the production meetings, but a meeting with the producers. And I remember we dropped the valuation and they were like, no way. Like, listen, and they did us a huge favor because it's like, listen, you go on there with that valuation, they're going to just get rid of you for whatever reason. So we had to find something that worked for the Sharks, worked for the producers, and worked for TV, right, to get us on the show. So that's how we came up with that valuation. Again, we knew what our valuation was beforehand. We still know what our valuation is, but it's just like, yeah, that's how we came up with the 200,000 for 5%, right? So when it got to 20%, it was like we had already discussed. I asked him what he was comfortable with, and he said 20%, and I said, okay, cool, that was it. So they were going to go higher than that. We weren't going to take it, and that would have just been that, right? So.
Yeah, no, it's a delicate balance of percentage and dollar value, specifically dollar value, because basically once you get past 200,000, it's just every 100,000 is like the odds of you getting a deal are just less and less and less and less. Yeah. Based on the history of them and the fact that they just don't like to spend, because it's just a lot of money to commit to one thing that may or may not work out. You could give them 80% of the company, but it's still a large sum of money for them to have to commit to one thing that.
And people forget. So I just wanted to say, people forget. Like I think sometimes because a lot of times with the pitching and everything, people kind of mix in venture capital, and like the Sharks. And the thing is like, no, it's just like you said, the Shark is one person, right? Like they're an individual, right? They're not a fund. They're not a private equity fund or firm. It's one person. So you're 100% correct. It is a lot of money to give up, right? Like to invest in, these companies. So it makes total sense.
I think a lot of people forget that they're not all billionaires either. There's only one billionaire. That's Mark. And Mark would like to stay a billionaire and not give, $500,000 to every person that comes on the show just for the sake of being a billionaire. It's still a lot of money. Like, to move that amount of money is a lot.
Yep. And most of it, if I'm like, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of his Shark Tank investments have not panned out, right? Like, in terms of like the end all be all, like
that's what I've
heard, like he invests in he invested in said companies and they didn't work out. So it's like, that's real money to Mark that's pretty much gone or lost. And it doesn't matter how rich you are, right? Like you still work for that money, it's still yours. And nobody likes losing money. Who likes losing money? You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, you do have some write-offs at some point, but you plan for those for as much as possible. And I mean, I remember once reading. I think Kevin was the most at least at one point, maybe like 3-4 years ago, he was the one that had the most deals fall through. But I think Robert was like pretty close behind. I mean, they all pretty much have deals that fall through for one reason or another, not just because of them and not just because of the entrepreneur, but sometimes, especially like talking with some of the people that have been on the show, entrepreneurs that end up getting deals with multiple Sharks is a task to not just to get the deal with them, but to actually get a deal that everybody can agree to, because now you're dealing with multiple sharks that have multiple interests and companies and things that intertwined. It is a task to get those deals done, for sure. But yeah, I think sometimes people just like to forget that they are people. And we talked about this on a live stream recently about Kevin and the whole FTX collapse, and it's like, Kevin's a person too. He doesn't mean that he's perfect. Just because he's got lots of money doesn't make him perfect. Right. He's also greedy, because like he's not afraid to take some money and like say, oh, that's a thing that sounds too good to be true. Well, how much are you paying me again? All right, well, it's okay because someone else will take the fall for it. I'm still on TV, and that's not going to change.
It was $12 million, right?
So, I heard between 12 and 15. Yeah,
that's a lot. That's a lot of that's
just to talk about it, and he talks a lot. CNBC, like MSNBC, as much as possible. So
Congress, wherever.
but he also shows you just how much. And that's why I was pointing out, like when I did that live stream too, is like you can go to Cameo and get him to say something nice about your company for like less than $5,000, and it used to be like 1,500.
Yep.
And I remember before I went in the Wayback Machine, but I remember seeing it for $500. You could get him to say literally anything for 500, like promote Ride Fresh for just $500. I know somebody that did it for their podcast conference.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, I don't think Kevin O'Leary's going to this podcast conference, but clearly they paid for a Cameo and like kind of cropped out the Cameo logo.
Mm-hmm.
But it just shows to show you, like, they're willing to do whatever for whatever amount of money.
Yeah, there's a lot of people like that. There's a lot of people like that. And again, I to your point is that nobody's perfect, right? Like I take that with me as well, right? Which is, people, I don't know what it is about people who have a lot of money and people just assume they can't make mistakes or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, people, they do mess up just like you, right? They just might have more money in the bank. It's
Mark Zuckerberg.
It's just like, it is what it is. So
yeah. It's I think we have to remember that we're all just still human at the end of the day. And most of the money came from a circumstance, a set of circumstances that happened. And it doesn't mean that you got everything right. You didn't figure out the universe.
Right. That's it. Circumstance. That's it,
So anyway, let's go. Like, you're going into the tank. Well, actually, before we get there, how did you talk about the process of setting up your pitch that you were going to make? And I guess we could start to get into the joke and how intentional, unintentional, all of that was.
Yeah. So you work. So we work. Each group is set of entrepreneurs works with the production team. So we work with the production team, one of the guys who was very familiar with our business. So they work with you from the time they hit you up about your application and your video submission. So you submit a video pitch. You're asked to submit a video pitch. And then they tell you, they work with you from one round to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, right? So they are your guiding light in terms of each one of those steps, what you have to submit, what needs to change on the next round. So we did a couple of rounds of video feedback. They gave different feedback like, hey, change the lighting here, change the pitch here. And so it's primarily a combination of feedback on the video and then also the written pitch. So from day one of them actually being assigned to you, they're the kind of primary thing they're helping you with is the pitch, which is the 90-second pitch that you hear with every entrepreneur on Shark Tank, right? And so they work with us through a couple of revisions about that. We work with them on like the props. So like you see the air cannons that we use, all of our setup. We actually had to have something like rendered, which I didn't know, which was one of the crazier parts of the process. They wanted us to actually have like a 3D rendering of what our display would look like. So I had to hit up one of our boys. Shout out to my boy Austin. He's like like a real life CAD designer, architect, and I had to have him do the rendering. So like, there's all of this stuff that the producers are consistently asking for throughout this 3 to 4 month period. And then they get to the point where you get approved. and then your pitch is actually finalized before you actually go and tape, right? And in the process, the producers are constantly reminding you to that the fact that you look, you might tape, but that doesn't mean that you'll air. So you kind of want to give yourself the best chance of airing. For some people, it's a sob story, right? For some people, it's like, and by sob story, I don't mean like fabricated. Like some people really have some really, emotionally triggering stories, right? And you see that a lot. For some people, it's a funny moment. For some people, they might like really say something aggressive to one of the sharks, right? I remember one time a guy was like, asked Kevin if he was out. And then he was like, okay, well, you can be quiet because you're right. Like, so there are different moments that happen in your pitch that are going to make it more TV friendly. So keeping that in mind, and I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. Keeping that in mind, okay, we're working on our script. We originally wanted to so we have Mavericks licensing, but we don't make those products currently. And with the schedule being dynamic, it was going to be $10,000+ for us to even try to get them done the right way. And we didn't know exactly what date we'd be shooting. So we could have potentially spent that amount of money and never even got that product. We spent money on other props that we never got because we shot 2 weeks early, right? So we weren't in a position to just have Mavericks air fresheners on hand. So knowing that and knowing the TV kind of moment, I'm like, well, we have Warriors air fresheners. So let's write a joke in the script, make a little fun of Mark, like a little poke. I'm a lifetime marketer, so I already knew that, look, negative, positive, or otherwise, like we're going to get a reaction out of him somehow. And I knew in my mind that reaction is going to be positive for the business, regardless of what the outcome is, because I know that we're going to create a moment that's going to be more than TV friendly. It's going to be viral, right? He could have laughed it off. We didn't know what he was going to do. They were giving the displays, and it just so happens that he had the Warriors air freshener given to him. We didn't necessarily plan that part, but it added to the moment. So I'm not mad about it at all. I'm sure the producers probably knew that was a good TV friendly thing to kind of add to the joke. But yeah, so we wrote the joke in. I thought it was pretty funny. I thought it was timely. Didn't know that he was going to react the way he did, but again, we were prepared for it. But didn't think he was going to be out as aggressively and as soon as he was. But a lot of people have been asking us about this, Joe, and for me, it's like, I totally get his reaction, and I respect it. I have no problems with the way that Mark Cuban reacted. I know people online, there's a lot of chatter about it, people calling us idiots and calling him sensitive and all that. I think it was just everybody sticking to their guns, right? Like for us, it was about creating a moment, and for him, it was about his passion for his team. And so I totally understand why he did. I don't feel, any kind of way. He was one of the sharks that we were, potentially looking to do business with. But at the end of the day, the reaction that we've gotten, I'm sure even as evidence of your video, right, and a lot of other stuff, it was a moment. And so those moments for me as the guy that's in charge of marketing, like constantly putting us in the social conversation, was the underlying goal, as well as making sure that we aired. And we walked out of that room confident that, hey, look, like all the stuff that happened in this segment, I'm pretty sure we're going to air at some point in time, right? So that was the full story, but behind that joke and behind that moment.
Joe, real quick, if you look at my face, there's a clip. If you look at my face after Mark says what he says, in my brain, I was saying to myself about Donovan, I was like, you're a genius, right? like because I'm smiling because I'm sitting here saying this is going to be a viral moment. I knew it. The moment Mark reacted that way, I was like, this is not what we expected, but my God, his reaction is not only going to get us on TV for sure, right? But it's going to create a viral moment. And kudos to Donovan, because that was, his idea. At first, I wasn't sure. I remember he knows, but I'll have the conversation with him like, man, you sure? Like, like you think he's going to react? But it worked. And I mean, that was just such a genius move. And the one thing I will say that Donovan said that I kind of feel differently on is when, and I wanted to touch upon that, is like, not that it's, it is what it is. The internet is what it is. But, the thought process that we're somehow idiots, to me, is just like, you know, I like that. I'm like, okay, like maybe you didn't agree with what we did, but like, listen, guys, like if you watch the pitch and you actually listen to what we're saying and talking about, nobody on that stage, us, the shark, nobody's are idiots, right? Like we know exactly what we were doing, guys, just so everybody knows. And the proof is in the pudding. And that's not, I don't say that just because Dom is my brother. I said it because of the results, right? So whether you agree with what we did or not, the one thing that you cannot argue with us about is the results, right? And everything else that's going on behind Ride Fresh. So I really wanted to just say that because it's like, you know, I get if you don't agree, but like, calm down. You know what I'm saying? Like, just a little bit. Like, nobody is, we know exactly what we're doing and we're confident in exactly what we did. And, you know, I'm just happy it turned out the right way.
So I feel dumb. Can I? So I when I record these live. I don't watch them ahead of time. So I don't do any like research or anything. And I also don't really follow the NBA like outside of the Sixers because I'm
Yeah,
more like I follow the 4 teams here in Philly.
yeah.
So like it didn't even occur to me about what the joke was about at the
Right.
time.
Right.
Like so I was like winning and I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. Like, sure. But it didn't occur to me at the time that like, oh, it was the Warriors. They beat the Warriors beat them.
Yeah.
And you know what's ironic is I think I might have actually been watching some of those games at a friend's house during a poker game. So I didn't
Probably.
like, I was
Yeah.
like, not even that. Cause, well, no, the Sixers lost in that round, right? I believe. Because we were watching
Yeah.
the Sixers game, and then the
Yeah.
Warriors and Mavs game came on afterwards. Yeah, so like I've
Mhm.
watched some of it, and it didn't even occur to me at the time, like
Yeah.
when watching it live, that was the case. That was the case, and that I knew that you had other teams there, but it just didn't. It didn't click for me.
No, it's all good. And that to that point that Don made about the timing, I think it's crucial for people to understand that too. We're on a flight to Memphis to talk to AutoZone, right? We had already had a meeting with them. So we're talking about doing tests, maybe 100, 200 stores, right? And then we get the call the minute we land, right? Don's on the phone. I'm like, yo, what's going on? He's got this smile on his face. He's like, okay, so we got the air date. And I said, that's great. But
The film date, the tape
right,
date.
the film date, not the air date, sorry, the film date. Right. And I was like, that's great. And he was like, yeah, but it's 2 days away. They told us we had to be there Saturday at 6 a.m. We're in Memphis on Thursday night, right? So we go in, and I'm like, okay, cool. There's no way we're ever gonna get Maverick air fresheners done in 2 days. It's not gonna happen, right? Like it wouldn't be possible. But we were just like, that's when everything started to take off because we used that as a tool with AutoZone 2 and ended up getting 2,000 locations. But I wanted to paint that picture too for people like, listen, that's part of how it goes on Shark Tank. There's no set plan for when they're going to call you until you're on. But when you're on, it's time to go. And we made that decision, committed to it, and we reap the benefits from it.
And one thing, I know you have a big entrepreneur audience, Joe. One thing I want to tell people is it's an example of, I mean, I don't want to say it too crudely, but sometimes you have to, let's put it like this. If you are a man, embrace your manhood, right? And you choose a choice and you go with it. That's one. And then the other thing is man, look, take what you have, right? Like in my mind, how we arrived at that joke was looking at what we had, knowing we weren't going to get the Mavs in time, right? So in my mind, it's this is the definition of an entrepreneur. You look at what you have. Okay, we have the Warriors. Okay, I know the Warriors beat them. Okay, boom. Well, then this is actually an opportunity. So instead of wallowing in the fact that we weren't going to be able to have Mavs air fresheners to give Mark Cuban, I'm thinking as an entrepreneur of how we can use what we do have. And I think that the important piece of that for anybody out there that's watching this as an entrepreneur is literally your perspective and approach and taking what you have. And it's a cliche, right? But it's a real thing. And this is an example of that, taking what you have and using that to flip it and to make it a positive for your business and not having to focus on what you do have. Because we could have had a meltdown about, damn, we can't get the Mavs. And, instead of that, my mindset shifted immediately to what's the best way that we can use one of the 5 teams we have. Oh, Warriors. Okay, boom, right? And so controversial, yes, ballsy, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, I just wanted to note that for like all the entrepreneurs out there, and kind of use that as an example of, using what you have instead of focusing on what you don't.
Yeah, and the last thing I add to that is, let's go back to this. Who people act like it was set in stone that Mark Cuban was gonna give us a deal. Like the thought process that like we had to cater to Mark so much to the point where it was like we're gonna get the deal with Mark just because he was an NBA. If we're talking brass tacks, we already have the NBA, right? So it's like I respect the hell out of Mark Cuban, right? I have no issues with Mark Cuban whatsoever. But it's also like, yeah, at what point, like Don said, like, are you going in there as a guppy, right? Like just to be devoured by the sharks, like, or are you walking in there as a man or woman and standing on your own in your own product, and you have the numbers, you have the business. I didn't know who was going to give us a deal, right? But like Don said, you have to be resourceful and then stand in that. And that's another point that I wanted to get across, which was everyone just assuming that Mark Cuban was going to invest in Ride Fresh. And it's like, no, you know what I mean? Like there are 5 sharks on that stage. And, even though Mark is the richest one, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to invest in us. You know what I mean? So, we just had to play the field. And that's what we did, man. We played the field for Ride Fresh, not Mark Cuban.
Ding for everything you guys just said. The words that came to my mind was brown nosing. And when we see this with a lot of entrepreneurs that go on the show, they'll make Shark Tank versions of whatever they make and stuff like that. But I mean, to specifically go out of, like, if you had them, like if you had it, you had it, right? But you didn't have it. And I think you clearly made the right decision, but I think you made the right decision because people could flip that on its head and say, oh, wow, look, they went out of their way to make sure they had Mavs. Is it licensed? Is it not licensed? Like, I know that was one of my questions that I had while watching. It was like, are these actually licensed? But if they weren't licensed, why not just make a Mavs one at that point, right? Like, yeah. Why not make a Shark Tank one at that point? Why not make a Hershevek, company logo, one, or O'Leary Funds or whatever it's called, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that you could, it easily could also, I mean, maybe nobody would point out that it would be like, oh, they're just brown nosing Mark, trying to get Mark because of the thing. But maybe the only reason there's the connection is because of the NBA. And you're absolutely right. There's no guarantee that any of them are going to give you a deal, let alone Mark. And just because Mark has the team and the NBA connection doesn't mean that he's, I got to jump in on this too. Like I have to do it because it's the NBA.
Right. Yeah. And that's key, right? And if you watch the show, if fans of the show, right, he does that a lot, right? Like people will bring in licensed or unlicensed, licensed, whatever, right? Like Mav stuff, and then they don't get a deal, right? So it's like, okay, so I mean, again, it's about at the end of the day, stop looking at them as your savior, as the crutch to your business, right? And look at like what you are, like where do you stand in this business conversation, right? Like it's not like, oh, again, the wants and needs, right, Joe? We go back to that, right? The wants and needs. And so I think that's crucial for anybody who's trying to think about, going on Shark Tank or pitching or whatever, right? Like make sure that your house is in order and you're solid there and you can have the conversation eye to eye instead of, oh, please give me a deal and I'll do anything to brown nose to get this. And, then you don't get it. Then you feel even 10 times worse, right? Like
this is what you get. This is the look you get when you brown nose too. I've seen that.
I mean, Joe, like for me, I think Trey's absolutely right. And then also like by the time, and people ask us this all the time, like, what was it like when he did go out so quickly? And I would be lying if I said it wasn't a little like, abrupt for us. But I think by the time you get there, people forget this. By the time you get to filming, you've worked on that pitch literally like thousands of times. We've worked on this business for 3+ years, 4 years. And so by the time you get there, for me, my logic is like, if I fall or if we fail, it's going to be on like what I thought we should do or what we thought we should do, not like brown nosing or trying to acquiesce or doing anything really. There's a litany. There's a lot of things you could do that kind of in business that you're like, I'm not really comfortable with that, right? It could be doing business with somebody. It could be the way somebody talks. So like, to me, if you do all that work on the business and on the trying to get on the show, then to me, it's like, yeah, you're damn right. I'm going to fall on my sword at the end of the day if I fall. Like at this point, like we've done all of this to like, for me to do something as not that doesn't really embody entrepreneurship. You know what I'm saying? Like to go that far, then stop trusting your gut at the end. It's like, for me, you know, that's why I told Trey on that call, I'm like, you know, whatever happens, like I'm personally, individually comfortable doing this because the fail safe is like exactly what happened was going to be the worst case scenario. Like he's out quick, and then we go kind of viral. Like I'll take that, right? Like from a business standpoint, I'll take that. But when you're there, I tell people all the time too, it's like, there's no editing, there's no sound guy, there's no music in the background, there's no retakes. So like we kill our pitch. If you go back and watch, like we didn't mess up really at all. And it happened just like that. Like that's not a cut, that's not a quick cut or an edit.
Real
like,
deal.
He was out first thing immediately when we were done. And so what they didn't show was though that a lot of the other sharks credited us on our resilience, right? So throughout this is like 4 minutes in. So we had another 35, 36 minutes of them actually asking business questions. And we stood tall and we delivered, right? And that's a lot of what doesn't get seen. It's like we could have easily kind of faltered right there, like, oh shit, like he's really out. Like we've worked our whole lives to get here, and he's out. Maybe in the back of my mind, it could have been like, damn, maybe I shouldn't have made that joke. But because we're, to Trey's point, we're so firm in who we are and the work that we've done, like we really didn't allow that to get us to stumble. And all of the other sharks on the panel noticed that, whether they invested or not. They all walked away feeling like, wow, like these guys came in prepared. They didn't let Mark, you know, Robert spoke a lot about that, which they cut out some of that. And he was
but
just
you
like,
can actually, you can see it. Like Don said, you can see that in Rob's response. One of the cuts, he's like, it just cuts straight to, he's like, you guys are the real deal, right? Like he didn't just say that out of nowhere, right? It was like, no, we were, they say that. I remember seeing a clip with Mr. Wonderful, and he's like, Kevin, he's like, you know, you can tell who is gonna win, right, and who's gonna lose. And I think that, again, like Don said, you know, by that point, you know, we're looking at them, the stage is elevated, but, you know, I would say not even just the Shark Tank experience. I would just say our experiences in general, like who we are as people, like where, like what we come from. Like there's not going to be any conversation in which once we are prepared, once we get to that point in that stage and the lights are on, we're warriors in the arena, right? So once he leaves and goes out, like, is it uncomfortable? Yes. But at the same time, you know, we're standing back on all our deals that we have, right? With Target, AutoZone, all these things are real, right? They're not like just things, figments in our imagination in the head. So we know who we are. We know where we are. And we say, okay. And if you're out, Mark, like I said, we're sorry at the end. I'm like, I'm sorry, Mark, right? Because it's like, look, man, you're a cool guy. I don't want to piss you off too crazy. It wasn't meant to really get you that upset. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, man, we're entrepreneurs, just like you were an entrepreneur at one point in one time. Obviously, you're at a whole nother level, but still, the game is the same, right? Which is that confidence. You have to have the utmost confidence in yourself. And if you don't have that, you know, maybe you should rethink what you're doing, right? So that's what I'd say.
Oh, 100%. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, no, the last thing I was going to say is like, it's similar to like what a lot of elite athletes talk about when they talk about pressure, right? And what the best athletes will tell you is like, you know, obviously getting nervous is a part of the natural human emotion to a lot of things, but it can be easily overcome by like your confidence, not just like your confidence walking around like that self, like manufactured confidence, but like actual confidence that's rooted in your preparation, right? Like when Steph Curry takes a shot on a three, he's not confident because he just feels like he can make it. He's confident because of the amount of shots that he's taken and the way that he's worked on his craft. So when the ball goes to him at the end of the game, whether he makes it or misses it, he's not nervous because he's like, I feel like I should be here. Like I know I should be here, and I'm going to step in and do what I've been doing for the past, you know, X amount of years. And we felt the same way, right? Like people ask all the time, like, do you get nervous? I'm like, yeah, I'm human. You get nervous, but that's overcome by like okay, well, then they start asking about the business, and the answers are the same as we've been giving every other meeting and every other potential investor and partner and whoever else for the last 4 years, right? Like, so when you get to the nitty gritty of it, I think the confidence that Trey's talking about is not a manufactured, thing from your own ego, but like actually rooted in your experience and your reps in the gym, right? It's like, yeah, to like Trey's point, like once we're talking about the business, we're just people talking about the business. Like there's not the fear element there because this is real. So like for somebody who's going to go up there and BS, maybe they start to get a little like, oh wow, they're on to me, right? But like if you're thorough and you're tight and you're on your job, like there's no reason to be nervous. Like what are they gonna do? Come beat me up? Like, like what are you, you know what I mean? Like what are you nervous about? Like I'm ready to talk about my business that we've been busting our asses on for years. Like, yeah, sure, let's talk about it, right? So I think that the confidence, I think especially for like the younger generation of entrepreneurs, because I think they're a very confident generation and group of people. But I think that it's important to remember that has to be rooted in like your work and your repetition and your, your experience, not just like, don't just walk out there, because they can sniff that too, right? Like when it's like, look at this guys, they ask you 2 legit questions about your business and you don't have the numbers. Yeah, your confidence is going to cut it, buddy. Like, you see that on the show that's happened quite a few times where they walk out there and they're,
like be somebody or something.
Yeah, and then it's like, and then they're like, oh, and as soon as they get that inkling, you've seen the show a million times, Joe, right? Like as soon as they get that inkling that there's a BS meter to be had, it's over, right? Like,
I mean, Damon's the bloodhound, man. He sniffs it out, and if he's not there, then it's Kevin, getting right to it and asking. And if it's not him, then it's probably Mark, right? Digging deep into what he, his detector's going off. So, no, I mean, I think you guys definitely made the right decision, and that that confidence comes from knowing that you're okay. It doesn't matter if you walk out and don't get a deal. It doesn't matter. I mean, it matters if you err, but it's not the end of the world if you don't, right? It's a lot of time and blood, sweat, and tears and money invested to make that happen. But at the end of the day, like, you're still moving forward with your deals. They're not going to beat you up or like call out, oh, I'm calling AutoZone right now and shutting your deal down, right? And to Mark's point, look, if that happened to Jeffrey Lurie, the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, like, and he didn't act in a similar type of way, we would have been roasting him on the radio like nonstop, because he just kind of like he kind of floundered when it came, push came to shove about his team. It's different when you have a team that's owned by an ownership, right? And there isn't one head person that's at the top or one family that's at the top. Like the Flyers are owned by Comcast, Universal, or whatever, Xfinity, Comcast, Universal. So yeah, it's like nobody's going to the CEO of Comcast and being like, hey, you're not doing the thing. Like, because he don't care. It's not like, it's just it's dollar figures on a piece of paper to him. It's not like when we had Ed Snyder here, who cared about the Flyers, who eats, sleep and breathed and, lived the Flyers, or Jeffrey Lurie, or any of the ownerships that, or owners, I should say, that like the buck stops here. And in Mark's case, he lives, breathes, and eats that, right? He doesn't own a bunch of different teams. I mean, even the Sixers ownership is the same dude that owns the New Jersey Devils, I think, and maybe one other team. So it's like, and nobody takes him seriously, because here in Philly, where we actually actively care about our sports team. Maybe in another town, other cities where people don't care as much, it's a different story. But for Mark, it's very real, very personable. And personal for him, because he invests so much of his time and energy into it. So I don't think he overreacted. And even if he did, it's for TV. He's not dumb. He's on TV.
Like Joe, so and for everyone, we never took it personally. right? Like there was not one time where we were upset at Mark. Like,
Oh, it's all. I'm talking about all the people in the comments that were taking it
Yeah.
personally for you guys or for Mark.
Yeah, it was very
right.
polarizing. It was very polarizing.
Yeah.
A lot of people, but that led to more conversation. But
was
he
the
definitely
conversation.
probably added some additional sauce on it to excite his fan base and make it for a better episode, right? I kind of felt like that in real time too. I was like, okay, that was a little extra, but I know why you're doing that, right? Like
You want it to air, right?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Because
So
ultimately the
and he's a
NBA is a
producer.
business, right? That's the thing. He is serving the NBA.
Right.
So at the end of the day, it's all about it's about the Mavs, but it's really about the NBA, and that helps put this in front of more people, right? And the people are gonna feel. You want people always to feel one way or the other, right? I want you to like absolutely love me or absolutely hate me. Don't not know, because if you don't know, then you don't know how to tell somebody about it. And if they don't tell somebody about it, then that's not working real well for you as far as getting the word out. So you guys wind up getting a deal with Barbara. Who was your first pick of Shark? Was it Barbara? It couldn't have been
Mark.
Barbara,
No.
Yeah, I would say, we definitely were eyeing Mark just because although we have the licensing, there were some things he could probably help us do on the distribution side with our licensed products. But I mean, outside of him, I didn't really have any. And even his preference was like, I would say a light one. Like I didn't have any preference. For me, it was about who was and even outside of Shark Tank, like who we partner with is about who is the best fit, but also who has like a fundamental belief in the business and us as entrepreneurs, right? So whoever was talking along those lines was who was going to get more favor with me. I kind of assumed Lori wasn't going to be a great fit. I think her feedback was valid. I didn't really quite understand really what Robert was saying with his feedback.
Yeah.
That was the only thing I was like a little confused about with the story with the air freshener. And it was like, all right, I guess but I didn't really have a major preference. I'd say anybody who I felt like was going to believe in us and support us and be a good working partner.
Yeah, for me, I would just say I think I didn't have any preference at all, right? Like I wanted, it's kind of like what Don said, which is the personality that really didn't matter to me. It was more about what can you do to actually help build and scale our company, right? Like the money is one thing, right? But it's also like, well, what can you do from, like Don said, a distribution standpoint, right? Like sales, digital marketing, whatever, right? Like what can you do that you can do better than us and do it bigger than us, right? Like to bring actual value to the company, not just the financial piece, right? So, we just wanted to see who would be that right partner. And Barbara stepped up, right? When everybody else kind of just was like, well, I don't really know. And, she really liked us as entrepreneurs, right? Like she said that straight up, and she was a very intent about that, and that's how we come to a deal, right? So.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's one of the things that we see in the tank is sometimes you get those surprise sharks that you wouldn't expect to necessarily be the one that wants to be the partner to that type of business. And so I think it's awesome that Barbara gave you, offered to give you guys a deal and run with it, right? I mean, yeah, it's funny you say Robert. You were kind of confused there with his feedback, but as we call on the show, he was, he's roberting it. I can't talk.
Robert,
yeah, no, it's all good. We just
Robert
during the show, we were just like in the back of our heads, we were like, okay, yeah, thank you, because it didn't make any sense. Just being honest, right? So we were just like, okay. Like that one, I don't get why you said you were out. It was something about like him and remembering air fresheners and him being a kid and having to go from Canada to Miami. And I was like, hey man,
yeah.
I guess, and we just kept it going. So
I wonder, like, I don't have the sound playing. No, that wasn't it. But no,
He said he was trying to wrap his head around getting us.
Oh, it's because all he could see in the back seat was the air freshener.
Right.
Yeah.
On his way from Toronto to,
Right.
I guess, Florida or whatever. But yeah. So I guess it was triggering for him. I mean, it's funny we pick up on things like that as kids, or even as adults, where it's like things that we don't even realize are triggering memories end up becoming those things. The smells of a house, the sounds of a sport, or the sounds of the playground or whatever. Like, it just becomes like a thing, and it triggers those memories for us. And Robert, I guess, hated sitting in the back of a car watching the little tree sway back and forth. But so you guys,
I bet you still rides in cars though.
oh yes. Well, he does. He doesn't like. Well, he probably does ride in the back of cars. That he can't see the front. Maybe depending on what kind of car it is,
Right.
can't see the front of it.
Right.
So you guys get the deal. You leave the tank. What's some of the first things you guys did after securing that deal in Shark Tank?
Well, the number one thing is they have a psychiatrist. So as soon as you go, you walk back to your dressing room. The first thing they do is have a psychiatrist come and talk to you to kind of make sure you're okay. Because the whole experience is like, it's a lot, to be honest. Like, it's just a wide range of emotions in a short span of time, right? So it's like, that's the first piece. And then we kind of excited to call our parents and our other business partner, tell them what happened internally. But it's like what I would describe as, it starts off as excitement, and then it's a contained excitement because we know that we just filmed and we were successful with Barbara, but we still don't know that we're going to air. So that, I would say, was the worst part, which is like from filming in July, right, all the way down to like not knowing from then until November 1st or 2nd that we would have an air date, right? So for those 3 months, I'm like literally waiting in my inbox every day to see an email that says you guys are confirmed to air. And I started getting really nervous because they showed week 1 or week 2, they showed like 3 of the other people that were in our pod or filming that day, right? So there was like, I think, a company called Whooples and some other people. I think it was week 2. And I'm like, wait, that's everybody that filmed the same day as we did. And like all the sharks have on the same clothes. So I'm like, oh shit, like, did we not make it? Like, was Mark, because he's a producer. So I'm like, did he like get really upset and tell him not to air us? Like, what happened? So I'm starting to get nervous. But yeah, from the time you film until the time that they notify you that you're going to air, it's a very anxiety inducing time, right? Because you just don't know, for one reason or the next, you don't know. And this is after 8 or 9 months of like them constantly reminding you, us having wins, right? Like, hey, you're going to film. Hey, you're going to film this date. Okay, you actually film, like all these wins, but every win is capped with like, okay, but you're not guaranteed to air, right? So like from the application process to actually filming and getting the deal, that their answer at the end of every notification is like in bold, in red in the emails, like, this does not mean you're airing, right? So like everything is like, you get excited, but you can't fully celebrate, if that makes sense. It's a very weird dynamic. And so by the time you get that, then that's super, super exciting. And then we went into planning mode for, we had a watch party here in LA, and, we just kind of celebrated it. We used that as a moment to celebrate collectively with a lot of supporters and family.
I would say for me, I remember the first thing we did after that psychiatrist came in, Don, if you remember, and shout out to Mariana Elizalde. She's our head of operations at FRSH. So she dropped us off, picked us up afterwards. We got the deal. And I just remember like going to get these bomb ass tacos, right? Like at the spot, and really just being like, wow, we actually did it. No matter what happens from this point on, even if we didn't air, I was happy because it was like, you know what, we really did that. You know what I mean? Like, we went on Shark Tank, really stood tall and got a deal in spite of all the stuff that happened in the beginning. Like, man, we really did that. And then like Don said, after that, there was the waiting period but I was the one kind of calming Don down a little, like, relax, bro. We're getting air. Like, I think it was telling because of the fact that the Woobles people, we met them on the way to the Sony lot. So they were in our van with us. So we're, talking to each other, and so was the other group. So then Don was like, I don't know, they just aired, and I was like, yeah, bro, but it's TV. They probably have the same stuff they wear anyway, somewhere laid out in the back. Like, we're gonna air, we're gonna be fine. This is too good of TV not to air it. Like, and I just kept on putting that energy out into the universe. And then we got the call from Barbara's business advisor, and then we were like, oh yeah, it's on now. So we got the congratulatory note, and then we're like, oh, it's on now. So we just started planning the party. And then that was pretty much it.
That is I think it's quite telling that having a shark go out that quickly, really it's a statement, right? And so I think you were pretty in the safe to say, yeah, there's it'd be really hard to believe that you wouldn't. You got a deal, plus you made a statement and it got a reaction out of Mark.
Yep.
Now, if you didn't get a reaction on Mark, then I could say, yeah, maybe it airs, maybe it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? But because you were able, there was somebody, I forget who it was that I interviewed that, it was the TA3. TA3, she made a mistake in her pitch, and she paused, and that later she found out that that's what enabled her to get air, because she ultimately didn't get a deal. And if she didn't have that, like, in the mistake in the pitch, where she just like froze for a second, then that would have created, I guess, not enough of a reason for her to air, and she got airtime because of that. So you just never really know. But if it's something memorable, then it's going to be something that enables you to was it Tate? Somebody went right before they went in the tank. They said into the microphone, they were like, all right, let's make great TV, guys. Right before where they walked out down the hall.
Yeah.
But
it actually, a funny story about that is there was somebody that we didn't know, obviously, but Don was friendly with the guy who was actually the last person you see before you go out. Mm-hmm. And that was like super comforting, right? Because he just basically was like, hey man, knock it out. Right. So it was crazy, because that was the last thing we heard before we went out. And it ended up helping for sure. So
that's awesome. So since having your watch party, because it's been like a month and a half, a little over a month and a half now. How's things been going since then?
It's definitely been going well. We definitely saw a boom in sales, obviously, that weekend. I think it's different now because of streaming, and the viewership is kind of over a wider range of time, right? Versus like the old school TV way of doing things, where it's like, everyone's pretty much watching at the same time. So it's been there was a spike, and then it's been a kind of like a maintained lower spike, I would say, but just an increase in brand awareness. And then as far as for the business, it's been good from a marketing standpoint because of the coverage that we got. We were fortunate enough to be covered in like Sports Illustrated, like your YouTube video, MSNBC, CNBC, Yahoo Business, a bunch of different publications that have covered that moment. But by doing that, obviously covered our business and increased our awareness. So it's been all positive as far as that goes. And then it's helped us open the doors for a lot of different other conversations with future retail partners as well, right? And it's just a good point of reference to have. Like, it quickly legitimizes you in a lot of business settings, right? Where you're just like somebody who otherwise maybe didn't want to hear what you had to say. If you're like, hey, I was on Shark Tank, everybody's ears perk up. They at least kind of start listening, right? And so inserting that into conversations at the right point in our outreach or in our conversations with people has helped a lot too, right? when it just kind of like moving forward, it'll always be that, right? It'll be something that just legitimizes you as a business person and us as a company. So that's sort of the impact that it's had, and I'm hoping that it will have, forever, really.
Yeah, on my side, I would just say, I mean, I think like Don said, being able to utilize the content from a sales perspective, like my outreach to people is just completely different. Like I just take a picture of me shaking hands with Barbara, right? Like, and incorporate that into my, outreach email. And people are like, oh, wow. You know what I mean? It's interesting because let's face it, you're not getting an email like that every day, right? Like,
No.
you know what I mean? So it's like, oh, okay. Now this person seems interesting to me. I want to have the conversation. So as a result, from the retail wholesale perspective, we're in talks with 2 other very large retailers, big box retailers, that we weren't before the show. And I think those are going to take off and be tremendously successful for us. And like I said, it's almost like you have Little Tree and then you got us, right? I mean, there's the other ones in between, but everybody knows Little Tree, doesn't know the other ones, right? Maybe Paradise Air. Those guys are cool over there. Shout out to them. But, we want to be the Pepsi to the Coke. So it's like, it's not hard for us to get in there and say, hey, here's our story. It's pretty cool. This is an impulse buy. And, those people in auto, the buyers and stuff, they get interested because they're like, oh, you guys want Shark Tank. And it's a cool product. You've innovated on the air freshener. Let's give it a shot and see how it goes. And so, I think that being on Shark Tank has helped us tremendously and will do so, for the foreseeable future.
Speaking of that, what's the future look like for you guys?
That's an open question, Joe.
Yeah.
Well, we'll go business.
As far as this year's a major year for us in terms of heading into some of the biggest retailers in the world, obviously with AutoZone and Target and hopefully some others here soon. And just taking this business to the next level on that side of things. Really our goal is to have a global retail operation fully functional by the end of the year. And be shipping Ride Fresh all over the world. And so we have an open call out to anybody in the distribution space, anybody in the retail space who wants to do business with us. We're open and looking, and then we're also bringing on people who believe in the product and feel like they can sell the product. We're expanding our sales team and our wholesale operation. Obviously, that those two go hand in hand. So anybody out there who's a fan or who thinks that they can sell these to their local gas station or to some global big distributor anywhere on that scale, we're definitely looking for people to come in and come on board and do that. And then on the branding side, just continuing to build our brand, hopefully get some other licensing partnerships. And then on the licensing side, the major thing is we're looking to do business on the distribution side for our licensed products. So big companies like Fanatics, anywhere that can, the teams themselves, right? Dick's Sporting Goods, all these kind of sports retailers that can help us distribute our NBA and hopefully other leagues that we hope to get licensed this year. One thing we learned, Joe, on the licensing side was it's great to have the licenses, but it's better to have partners to help you sell those goods, right? That's where the value comes in as a licensing partner. So we're definitely looking to establish relationships and do business in that space in a major way. One of the things we couldn't highlight because of media conflicts on the show was our SpongeBob and our formerly Viacom, Paramount products, which we have Nickelodeon, SpongeBob, which has been tremendously successful for us. So looking for more distribution on that side as well. But I'd say as a business, really growing into retail and continuing to push our brand on the direct to consumer side, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much more to add to that, right? Like I think I mentioned in the show $300 million market, and it's like I tell people, like you can say you have a $3 billion market, right? But there's 1 million players in the market. So what really are we talking about here? For us, I think obviously that 300 million a year figure is just in the United States. But like Don said, these things are sold everywhere, right? So we're looking for global distribution And like I said, we've had a few people like New Zealand, for example, the different parts of the Caribbean reach out and just, see if we're, able to offer it. So our goal is to get worldwide distribution on Ride Fresh. But in the meantime, like Don said, we're willing to take a percentage of that 300 million. And yeah, it's not a billion, but for a company that's our size in terms of 3 founders, 10 people working for us, yeah, we'll do that. You know what I mean? No brainer. So, yeah.
Hey, look, it's all about steps, right? You can't get to the billion without the million first, right?
Straight up.
I mean, it can come in different speeds, but you still gotta go through it to get there. So, tell everybody how they can get their own. Well, actually, before we get to that, how did you guys wind up coming across the video?
You were pretty quick to post this, man. Like that's
he knows those YouTube algorithms. He knows those.
Yeah, so like I saw you like commentating, and then I was like, I liked you as a commentator because I was like, you know what, this guy, he's not like a lot of these YouTube shock jock, individuals that just want to just, do the most extreme shit possible. You really are breaking it down from a perspective that helps people learn and, kind of think about the steps as best as you can while you're interpreting it. So I was like, man, this guy seems super reasonable. So I saw the comments going down and I was like, you know what? Let me reach out to this guy, Joe, because he's got a great channel and I like the way he breaks it down. So I just decided to reach out and then you responded and here we are today, man.
Yeah. So I do post these. Well, thank you. First off, I do my best to maintain authenticity, and I try not to edit the videos. They're all live shot. We'll do it live because that's the way it is, and that's the way I plan to keep it. Yeah. Exactly. Because I want people. Well, I want the challenge. It's a challenge to go into these and not know, and I record them the nights that they air for the most part. There's a few, I mean, I do back episodes too, but the new ones, I do them like this upcoming Friday in 2 nights. I'll be doing that episode that night and literally having it up before it ever even gets to the West Coast. All four pitches before it gets to the West Coast. So I sacrifice my Friday nights to be here and do these videos. And it's funny because I actually I'll watch my eyes in some of the videos as it's getting later, because I usually wake up at 5 in the morning. So by 10, 11 o'clock at night, I'm staring at a screen and my eyes, if I stare too long, my eyes are kind of getting a little defocused. It's kind of funny. Not everybody notices it in the videos, but no, that to me, it's important because you guys have so much, search traffic coming in that time, especially on the East Coast. West Coast, not as much. You can definitely see from the hour to hour of the I know Don, because it goes down, but
I know. I was looking at myself. I was in the middle of setting up the last stuff of the event, which was on the West Coast, and people were blowing up my phone from the East Coast because it was it's on now, and I had forgotten about that completely. I mean, I knew it aired, but I was like, a lot of the boom is East time centric.
It is. So it's important, for me to get, usually I have the first pitch up before the episode finishes airing here on the East Coast, if everything goes well, because there's a whole mess of things that can go wrong, and then sometimes I do have to edit it a little bit to get around those copyright claims and things. But yeah, for the most part, I try to make it as timely as possible because it is timely. It's a huge boon to the channel, and it enables people to learn more about me and learn along with me, because I'm learning too. I don't always know everything, and I think that's important for any super entrepreneur to always be learning and teaching at the same time. And keep in mind that you guys you're only seeing 8 minutes of a whole 45+ minute thing. So I know recently somebody was like, oh, Joe, you're always a cheerleader. Yeah, I'm a cheerleader for the people, because they're actual people. They're not playing characters, and it's their actual business. And I don't know everything, and I'm not going to purport to know what somebody else that actually likes a certain type of product would want. Like, I want to look at it from the number standpoint, from the business standpoint, and what the marketing, what they're doing right, what they could be doing better. And that's why we look at the websites at the end and all that. Speaking of websites, we pull up your website here, and I think it's just so important for those aspects for entrepreneurs to be able to learn from what's working, what's not working, what could be working better, and all that. And keep in mind that, again, you're only seeing a small fraction of the whole picture. To me, and I'm never, I mean, I don't want to say never, but you're not going to see me making those shock jock type of like hot takes just for the sake of trying to get attention, because that's not me. That's not how I operate. And I want people, it's about learning first and foremost. So, I'm glad that you guys reached out and came on. So tell everyone where they can go get their Ride Fresh air fresheners.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. Ridefresh.com, RIDEFRSH. We're still running our Shark Tank bundle promo where you can get, the 20% off. We usually are subscription only outside of our licensed goods, but one of the things we've tried lately is as a starter bundle. So prior to Shark Tank, we did, but we kind of wrapped that up in the whole Shark Tank wave of things, just to give people a chance to try us out without having to commit to a subscription. So that bundle's still up there, top of the website. And you can still get 20% off of that by entering that code above, or you can just choose to subscribe, or you can buy the NBA ones or the SpongeBob ones. It's totally up to you. One of the things we've done over the last year and a half is expand the product offering. So we started with just 2 air fresheners a month, but now we moved into the licensed goods, the bundles. You can actually gift as well. So if you want to gift somebody else an air freshener, if you know that that's one of their favorite teams, you can gift them that subscription or buy them directly. And then you can also get different tiers of the subscription. If you want to go the subscription route, you can get 2 a month, you can get 5 a month, and then you can get different levels of choice, right? So you can choose your individual scents, you can choose from pairs, or if you get the 5 a month customized subscription, then you can choose each individual scent of those 5 that you'll receive on the monthly. But if you just want to try us out, there's the bundle package there above. And then again, those licensed products, which you can try directly as well.
And now, are they all the same scent?
No, the different teams are different scents. We don't.
Okay.
If people ask, we'll let them know. Like the Miami Heat one is our midnight scent. The Golden State Warriors is Ocean Breeze. But what we realized in testing is people care about the team. Obviously, they all smell really, really good. But the team is kind of like the more important factor for those. But if they ask, the scents are available there.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, all of you should absolutely go check out ridefresh.com and get your scents and your teams. Guys, I really, really appreciate taking the time and extra time here. I know we ran a lot over the time we were supposed to allot.
No worries, Joe. We're happy to be here, man. And like I said, we're happy to help support you, and then help support a channel that's actually informative and helping people grow, and then showing interest, right, in the companies that go on Shark Tank. That's always a win-win. So, thank you for inviting us to come on to your show.
Oh, of course. It's greatly appreciated, guys. And you're welcome back anytime. Anything I could do for you, please don't hesitate to ask. Happy to help. And I appreciate you making it all the way to the end of this video. So I'll see you in one of these 2 videos over here. If you haven't watched our pitch and Mark's, maybe if I select the right side, Mark's reaction over here. If not, I'll see you in the next video over there. Take care and go be super.
Nice, Joe. Thank you.